Yes, sir.
And another question, what,
Yes.
on the national sales tax, what is your
I
thoughts
mean,
on
a
that?
VAT tax, a value-added tax.
Yeah, well, that,
I oppose it. I oppose it for a couple of different reasons. One is that, really, honestly, the last thing we need now is a new tax. We need to cut taxes. We need to control our government's spending so that we won't be building massive debt as we cut taxes. But the act of cutting taxes, the act of not taxing you more, will actually grow the economy. We'll have a bigger pie. I mean, that's real stimulus. Now, all the evidence shows that. The evidence of our history, if you look at what economists write about, there's no multiplier in giving money to the federal government. We do need to confer some of our treasure on the federal government so that it can do the things we really desperately need it to do. Again, you go back to the instruction manual, the enumerated powers, defense, borders, the environment, general welfare. But so many other things we don't need it to pay for. I want you to have the power to control your own health care. I don't want a VAT tax to be conferred on you. I don't want you to be burdened with that in order to pay for $1 trillion bureaucracy. So I think it's a very bad idea. And I will certainly vote against it. And I will vote against the spending that makes some in Congress feel that a VAT would be a good idea. I don't think it'd be a good idea. Yes, yes, sir.
We're in a time of war, whether we realize it or not. We also have the aging veterans population. We have a threat right now in Montrose, VA of 114 acres, losing over 100 of it from the enhanced lease program that would build condominiums for rich people that want to overlook the Hudson. What is your stance on the Montrose situation?
Sure. Well, thanks to you, Carl, that with your Veterans Committee task force that I learned about the Montrose problem, and I visited Montrose last week briefly. They had an observance for Korean War veterans, and I was very impressed with the care that clearly has been taken to maintain this facility. I was really struck by that. It was immaculate. And clearly there's a lot of need, and there's a growing need because we do I know Willie Nazario's talked about it. He's one of our veterans from Peekskill, and he's also on our committee. There's an increasing need for psychological and post-traumatic services, including traumatic brain injury. So there is some thought that Montrose might have a role in the system to make the campus, if you will, more cost-effective from the federal standpoint. Perhaps that's the way of putting it. So I think the moratorium, there's been a moratorium proposed for a year, so the federal government doesn't pursue any conversion plans further for another year, and I support the idea of that moratorium so that they can really give it some good thought. We owe our veterans every debt of gratitude. We owe them all the care that they need for what they have done for us. And thank you, Carl, for what you've done for us. And if we have other veterans here, any other veterans here? Thank you, Frank, for keeping us safe. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Listening to all the laws that Congress and the Senate has passed, and I am very upset because there has to be a check and balance between the judicial, the executive, and legislature. And apparently, Congress has given away the baby, in a sense. She's not taking the responsible checks and balance on the executive. And in other words, when you're going to be on a committee, are you going to be in favor of a 2,300-page bill? Or is it going to be simplified that we could all understand? And that to be determined, the czars.
Right, I know. No,
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. No, I think number one, simple principle. No member of Congress, no member of the Senate, no senator should vote for a bill that he or she has not read in its entirety. That goes without saying. Most of them don't read these big, complicated bills. They're very hard to read. The language is arcane. They need to be translated. I mean, I've scanned, I've reviewed the House bill, the Senate bill, and it's not easy. It's very heavy slugging. So if they need to be interpreted, that's a problem, and they're finding all sorts of errors. Just as an example, with the new health law, some of them will actually make it easier to overturn this law, so that they'll work in our favor. No, but the second principle is, and we've alluded to it before, but no bill should be that granular. You know, if they're writing laws to that degree of detail to govern which belong, your affairs, if you will, to govern the private sector, I submit to you there is a big problem. That's why when we talk about separations of powers, let's talk about the 10th Amendment. What's conferred on the states? What's conferred on our communities? There is far too much centralization going on. There's far too much ruling from the top. So that all needs to change, and I think it will. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, one last,
And then I'll take,
I've been bogarted.
one more and we'll...
Okay, and then speaking of checks and balances, one thing, the Supreme Court figures into this as well, and they recently, you know, with the, they're greenlighting unlimited funding by corporations and unions, you know, which to me is, you know, very frightening. But what do you feel about at least having a full disclosure of the sources of that funding?
I think the concept of transparency makes sense to me, I consider the Citizens United decision to be an appropriate one. I felt that it is a legitimate First Amendment issue, so I did not have a problem with the Citizens United decision. I do have a problem with the Disclose Act, which actually, again, typical act of this Congress, and not just this one, but certainly this Congress is the one we're dealing with. They carve out for the NRA got to carve out. You know, the SEIU, I believe, got to carve out. I mean, the Sierra Club got to carve out. The SEIU, I aired the Sierra Club. There are ways in which these laws don't make any sense. If you're applying the First Amendment, rather, it should be universally. I do think transparency is the right concept. Accountability and transparency. Everybody should know. There are ways in which we can provide that information to people about campaign contributions, about contributions to various sorts of funds that propound points of view in the public square. I don't have a problem with that as long as it's universally applied. The Disclose Act is a bad act, and so I am opposed to the Disclose Act per se. I'm not opposed to transparency. I think transparency is good, but when you ask the Congress to do these things, unfortunately, end up being problematic. One more question, and when I say public, I mean among the group, and then I'll stay for as long as everybody wants to ask me questions individually. Do we have one more question? Doctor?
How do you deal with the concept of building a mosque on ground zero?
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania site was
Yes, ma'am. You know, as I understand it, the permission has not yet been granted. I gather that it is under the purview of the city of New York to grant this permission. It seems insensitive at best to propose building a mosque right at that site. Building a mosque in New York City, of course, is fine. We celebrate freedom of religion. It would seem to be a very unfortunate choice of location, absolutely. And I understand the opposition. This is where these battles of opinion are played out in the public square. It's going to come down to what the citizens of, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's not a federal issue per se, but what the citizens of New York City decide. The debate is impassioned. And I do understand the objections of those who lost loved ones there, because that act of terror was carried out in order to propound a certain brand of religious fanaticism. Now, having said that, clearly, and I have friends who are Muslim, clearly that does not represent Muslims, but it certainly represents a faction that has a bitter history in the United States. So I think it would be a great gesture towards the community if those who are building this mosque would consider siting it somewhere else. By all means, build it, but site it somewhere else. And I think that would be a really great gesture to you. Thank you all for coming.